In this video, I'd like to talk about data. As someone who is new to the SENDCo role, it'll be very helpful to use data to find out lots about your context. And then of course, as you grow into the role, to continue to use data to see how students with SEND are progressing in a variety of ways. You may or may not be a SENDCo or a person who's naturally inclined towards data. There are of course clear reasons why it's important to do so, and the larger your school environment, the more important this becomes. I strongly encourage you to think about who else can make the data bit of your job manageable. So your school may have a data manager, but it may not. It may have an administrator who can take a day-to-day lead on data, or it could be the head teacher in a smaller school. For specific bits of data, perhaps there's an attendance lead in the school, a deputy head teacher who's already got the information that you need, saving you the need to create your own spreadsheets and tracking documents. Perhaps the behaviour lead has recently reported to governors about the behaviour of various groups within the school, including those with SEND. It's worth thinking what bits of data are already out there and which people in your school will have already looked at the bits of data you will need from an SEND point of view. You could lose your life in data, of course. There's always another spreadsheet you could create for yourself that would tell you something new, and there is a danger of avoiding the real bread and butter of the job, perhaps around supporting and improving teaching and learning, because you're spending your life pouring through data. I think it's about identifying what's really important and then trying to find that in the quickest, easiest way possible so it can lead to some really good actions. The first thing you will want to be doing with data is using it to help you to understand the context of students with SEND in your school. You need to know what you're looking at in terms of SEND in your setting. The data gathering bit of this is quite straightforward. Most of what you need to know here is reported to the DFE each year through the annual census. From the information that someone in your school has had to send off anyway, you'll be able to see what types of SEND feature most prominently in your school. So, SPLD, MLD, etc. To what extent boys may dominate the SEND register in your school. To what extent students who qualify for pupil premium feature on your SEND register. Whether particular year groups dominate or are underrepresented on your SEN register. Then, once you know this context, again, just from getting information that your school has had to declare in the census anyway, you can do a couple of things. You could look at your other bits of data in more detail. Is it students with social, emotional and mental health needs who are also my attendance focus? So if we're looking for particular patterns within that information that you've already got. Another thing you can do is you can ask yourself questions that present from looking at your context. If there are a lot of students within your Year 8 who are on the SEN register, does more resource need to be thrown at that year group? Do your teaching assistants need to be more heavily deployed within their year group? Do you need to make sure that you have interventions that particularly work for your Year 3s if that's where the needs are? You could ask yourself, do you need a greater whole school training focus on, for example, speech, language and communication needs, if that's what dominates your SEN register? You might think, do I need to be looking at a potential issue with under-identification of students with, let's say, a specific learning difficulty, such as dyslexia? If there are very few of those students on your SEN register, then think about how you can solve this. What kind of screening tools might you need to help you overcome that? You might need to be thinking, do you need to push your head teacher to employ a part-time counsellor, for example? If the balance of your SEND register shows strong evidence for a high SEMH need in your school. Lastly, in terms of context, to really understand what the numbers mean, it can be very useful to compare to national. This information is released every year by the DFE. Their first statistical release for SEN you can find with a quick Google search. You can quickly see whether your context places you above or below national average, i.e. for students at SEN support, students with EHCPs, etc. The three questions at this stage to really be asking yourself and making sure that you do understand about your context are: number 1, what is the makeup of my SEN register? Number 2, how does that sit when compared to national statistics? Then, number 3, how do the answers to these first two questions affect where I'm putting my resources for SEND?